The Confederate, like the Union Treasury, did not have the courage to force the issue upon taxation and leaned throughout the war largely upon loans. It also had recourse to the perilous device of paper money, the gold value of which was not guaranteed. Beginning in March 1861, it issued under successive laws great quantities of paper notes, some of them interest-bearing, some not. It used these notes in payment of its domestic obligations. The purchasing value of the notes soon started on a disastrous downward course, and in 1864 the gold dollar was worth 30 paper dollars. The Confederate government thus became involved in a problem of self-preservation that was but half solved by the system of tithes and impressment which we shall encounter later. The depreciation of these notes left governmental clerks without adequate salaries and soldiers without the means of providing for their families. During most of the war, women and other non-combatants had to support the families or else rely upon local charity organized by state or county boards. Long before all the evils of paper money were experienced, the North, with great swiftness, concentrated its naval forces so as to dominate the southern ports which had trade relations with Europe. The shipping ports were at once congested with cotton, to the great embarrassment of merchants and planters. Partly to relieve them, the Confederate Congress instituted in May 1861 what is known today as the $100 million loan. It was the first of a series of produced loans. The Treasury was authorized to issue 8% bonds to fall due in 20 years and to sell them for exchange of produce or manufactured articles. In the course of the remaining months of 1861, there were exchanged for these bonds great quantities of produce, including some 400,000 bales of cotton. In spite of the distress of the planters, however, the illusion of King Cotton's power does not seem to have been seriously impaired during 1861. In fact, strange as it now seems, the frame of mind of the leaders appears to have been proof that year against alarm over the blockade, for two reasons. The Confederacy regarded the blockade at first as a blessing in disguise. It counted on this act as a protective tariff in stimulating manufactures, and at the same time the South expected interruptions of the flow of cotton towards Europe to make England feel her dependency upon the Confederacy. In this way, there would be exerted an economic coercion which would compel intervention. Such reasoning lay behind a law passed in May forbidding the export of cotton except through seaports of the Confederacy. Similar laws were enacted by the state. During the summer, many cotton factories joined in advising the planters to hold their cotton until the blockade broke down. In the autumn, the governor of Louisiana forbid the export of cotton from New Orleans. So unshakable was the illusion in 1861 that King Cotton had England in his grips, the illusion died hard. Throughout 1862 or even 1863, the newspapers published appeals to the planters to give up growing cotton for a time and even to destroy what they had, so as to coerce the Englishmen. Meanwhile, Mason had been accorded by the British upper classes that generous welcome which they have always extended to the representatives of a people fighting gallantly against odds. During the hopeful days of 1862, the golden age of Confederacy, Mason, though not recognized by the English government, was shown every kindness by the leading members of the aristocracy, who visited him in London and received him at their houses in the country. It was during this period of buoyant hope that the Alabama was allowed to go to sea from Liverpool in July 1862. At the same time, Mason heard his host express undisguised admiration for the valor of the soldiers serving under Jackson and Lee. Whether he formed any true impression of the other side of British idealism, its resolute opposition to slavery, may be questionable. There seems little doubt that he did not perceive the turning of the tide of English public opinion in the autumn of 1862, following the Emancipation Proclamation and the great reverse of September and October, Antietam, Sharpsburg, Perryville, Corinth, the backflow of all three of the Confederate offenses. The cotton famine in England, where perhaps 1 million people were in actual want through the shutting down of cotton mills, seemed to Mason to be looming up in fearful propositions. The public mind, he wrote home in November 1862, is very much disturbed by the prospect for the winter, and I am not without hope that it will produce its effect on the councils of the government. Yet it was the uprising of the British working people in favor of the North that contributed to defeat the one important attempt to intervene in American affairs. Napoleon had made an offer for mediation, which was rejected by the Washington government early in the next year. England and Russia had both declined to participate in Napoleon's scheme, and their refusal marks the beginning of the end of the reign of King Cotton.